In the ancient pages of Bede's ecclesiastical history, a mere 140 manuscripts unveil the tapestry of 8th century Anglo-Saxon England. Among them, the More MS, Cotton, Tiberius A. 14, Cotton, Tiberius C. 2, and the No More MS stand sentinel, linking us to Bede's very thoughts. Transition to Autarky. Across the annals of time, a governance experiment unfolded in 281, known as the Autarky. Attempting to quell the empire's turmoil, it divided the Ariman Empire into 4 quarters, each ruled by a senior emperor and a junior emperor. The fate of this experiment, however, was etched in the seams of history. Autarky, or New State 272 to 297. In 272, the blood-soaked fields of a Volsci invasion marked the demise of Emperor Heraclian and his heir Valentius. From the chaos, a low-born general named Auxentius emerged, seizing power after defeating Heraclian's surviving son at the Battle of Scutum. Buoyed by early triumphs, Auxentius faced the challenges of a diminished empire, grappling with uprisings and external threats. Autarchs. The Autarchs, guardians of the divided realm, ushered in a new era. The first Autarchy, 281 to 296, and the second Autarchy, 296, tackled the Gonrid Empire, a powerful local rival born from the ashes of Exburtia's fall. The zenith of the Autarchy was marked by the traumatic burning of Rome in 297, leaving the Ariman Empire stunned and unity wavering. Gonrid Empire, 256 to 294. Amid the chaos, the Gonrid Empire, led by Vetrianus, seized Exburtia and the island of Vanarambaeum, emerging as a formidable rival. The loss of southern provinces triggered uprisings across the Occident, as barbarian tribes, pirates, and rebellious governors exploited the empire's vulnerability. As the Autarchy's legacy unraveled, the narrative reached a turning point in 303 with Methodiano's acclamation as both Venerabilius and Cotta. The once promising experiment crumbled, leaving Auxentius to his demise in 305, succumbing to the despair of a collapsed system. Across manuscripts and chronicles, the tale of Anglo-Saxon England and the Autarchy endures, a testament to the ebb and flow of empires, the rise and fall of leaders, and the indomitable spirit of those who etched their stories onto the pages of history. One of his first steps was to quickly appoint his fellow general, Numerian, as Venerabilius, or co-emperor, and send him north to the Mare Centrum, to make sure that it didn't break out into turmoil once again. This system of 2 ruling emperors, mutually supporting each other, became a model for a more ambitious scheme. At the time, Auxentius was able to concentrate on the issues south of the Central Sea, whilst Numerian focused north of it. Added to this atmosphere of tension and strife was the increasing friction between the polytheistic religions that were long established in Rome and the rising monotheistic religions, inspired by the ancient peoples on the desert fringes of southern Occident. These take many forms, from mystery cults drawing on gods from older or foreign civilizations, to energetic faiths preaching about a messiah having risen then put to death by the Ariman authorities. Auxentius was able to oversee a return to peace for almost a decade. It was still a fragile one. The breakaway provinces to the south and barbarian tribes were still waiting to see if Rome once again became weak. These included the old enemies of the Arimans, the Volsci. In a mood of optimism, Auxentius referred to this new system as the New State or New Empire, Novus Imperium, on several monuments that he erected at this time and even several speeches read out on his behalf to the Senate in Rome. As well as this, Auxentius enacted laws to try to salvage the situation within the empire, attempting to stabilize inflation by putting down edicts on maximum prices that could be charged for items such as bread, and the persecution of those who would not honor the gods by the traditional sacrifice. This was especially aimed at the followers of the executed prophet, who had spread across the entirety of the east of the empire. New State. Coin of Auxentius. With his earlier model of splitting the empire into 2, Auxentius supposed that breaking the system down even further would give even more flexibility. He made the move of subdividing the empire and raising several successful generals and provincial administrators to the imperial rank, in order to improve the ability of the army and the state to react to any issues. Despite being the senior emperor, Auxentius sought, and gained, the permission of Numerian to act further. The four main divisions were along a north-south, east-west line. The north-south line ran roughly from the Haru city of Peria to the Suverenian city of Dubasari, and the east-west line from Tagmatine city of Commodopolis to the Adapton city of Telekois. These quadrants would be called districti. Auxentius appointed one senior emperor and junior one emperor into each districti of the new empire, which broke with the idea that there was one single emperor in charge of Rome. The senior emperors were given the styles of the old sole emperor and were called venerabilius, whilst the junior emperors were given the styles of the emperor designate and were called caudas. Despite the differences in style, each of the now 8 emperors were held to be of equal stature, with Auxentius' hope being that this would do away with the threat of a victorious general being proclaimed emperor in the field by his troops. In order to further discourage armed conflict between the joint emperors, Auxentius also put in place a term limit on the venerabilii, in order to try to reduce the chances that the cottae would attempt to overthrow their senior partners. The term limit was to be of 15 years, after which the cottae would succeed the venerabilii, who would retire from active military and political life. The venerabilii would also meet every 3 years at Rome, in order to discuss and coordinate their quarters. Again, this was an attempt to prevent any of the emperors from attempting something other than uniform action and strengthening the tottering Ariman state. Auxentius appointed himself as the venerabilius of the southeastern districtus, Expuriensis, with his capital at Cotta Venerabilia, near modern Clamados, and the name indicated his aim, bringing Vestrianus to heel. His cotta was Ambrosianus, a general who had been leading the legions against Vetrianus' empire for some time. Their focus would be on the breakaway provinces and reclaiming them for Rome, as well as incursions by the Assyrii. The venerabilius of the northeastern districtus was Numerian, headquartered at Agrigentum, which lies to the south of Trapezon. There, he would lead the defense of the Thalarican shore, the frontier that was regularly raided by Thalaric pirates from the islands that bordered the Mare Tempestatum, as well as the occasional attack by the Volsci. His cotta, Petronius, would focus on keeping the ancient Gari from penetrating into Rome. This districtus was known as Litus Thalaricanum, after its main defensive fortifications. In the ancient pages of Bede's ecclesiastical history, a mere 140 manuscripts unveil the tapestry of 8th century Anglo-Saxon England. Among them, the More MS, Cotton, Tiberius A, 14, Cotton, Tiberius C, 2, and the Namor MS stand sentinel, linking us to Bede's very thoughts. Across the annals of time, a governance experiment unfolded in 281, known as the Autarchy. Attempting to quell the empire's turmoil, it divided the Ariman Empire into 4 quarters, each ruled by a senior emperor and a junior emperor. The fate of this experiment, however, was etched in the seams of history. Autarchy, or New State, 272 to 297. In 272, the blood-soaked fields of a Volsci invasion marked the demise of Emperor Heraclian and his heir Valentius. From the chaos, a low-born general named Auxentius emerged, seizing power after defeating Heraclian's surviving son at the Battle of Scutum. Buoyed by early triumphs, Auxentius faced the challenges of a diminished empire, grappling with uprisings and external threats. The Autarchs, guardians of the divided realm, ushered in a new era. The first Autarchy, 281 to 296, and the second Autarchy, 296, tackled the Gonrid Empire, a powerful local rival born from the ashes of Expertia's fall. The zenith of the Autarchy was marked by the traumatic burning of Rome in 297, leaving the Ariman Empire stunned and unity wavering. Amid the chaos, the Gonrid Empire, led by Vetrianus, seized Expertia and the island of Vanarambaeum, emerging as a formidable rival. The loss of southern provinces triggered uprisings across the Occident, as barbarian tribes, pirates, and rebellious governors exploited the empire's vulnerability. As Auxentius took the reins of the Ariman Empire, his strategic vision unfolded with the appointment of his fellow general, Numerian, as venerabilius, or co-emperor. Numerian's task was clear: head north of the Mare Centrum to ensure stability and prevent the resurgence of turmoil in that region. This system of 2 ruling emperors, mutually supporting each other, became a model for a more ambitious scheme, allowing Auxentius to focus on the issues south of the Central Sea while Numerian managed affairs to the north. While the empire sought equilibrium under the dual leadership, an undercurrent of tension and strife brewed. The clash between the long-established polytheistic religions in Rome and the ascendant monotheistic beliefs, inspired by the ancient peoples on the desert fringes of southern Occident, heightened the complexities of Auxentius' rule. The dichotomy between the old and the new, the polytheistic and the monotheistic, echoed through the corridors of power, setting the stage for conflicts that would define the Ariman Empire's path. Against the backdrop of this cultural clash, Auxentius and Numerian navigated the delicate balance of leadership, facing not only external threats, but also the internal strife fueled by religious differences. As the pages of time turned, the duality of rule under Auxentius and Numerian unfolded, a tale of ambition, religious discord, and the intricacies of leadership in a realm at the crossroads of tradition and change. In the crucible of this era, the fate of the Ariman Empire hung in the balance, shaped by the choices of those who sought to guide its destiny, Delamatius, and they were to keep in check the Cussian Empire, which had never recovered from its catastrophic defeat at the hands of Theodorus in 103. They were based at Causacris, and the districtus was called Limes Atlanticum. The final, southwestern districtus was to defend the remaining provinces that bordered the Amnalo Sea, and from there the regular incursions from the tribes of Azania. This districtus was to be led by the Venerabilius Valtonius and the Cata Hermogenianus, and their capital was Tarentum, and was called Tarentumensis. At first, it seemed that the new state, with its rules of succession, hierarchy, and areas of focus, would truly be a new age for the Ariman Empire. It ran smoothly through its first crisis, the deaths of Calicaris and Numerian, both in 286, out of disease and Ecvisi pirates respectively. The succession system worked smoothly, and their cottae became venerabilii and in turn appointed their own subordinates without any sign of protest from the legions under their command, as often happened in the past. The new cottae, Decimius and Arborius, took up their positions, and Arborius launched a punitive campaign to punish the barbarians for their actions. These helped to stabilize the situation further, and no new attacks against Rome came from those quarters for several years. Tackling the Gonrid Empire. In 287, the second triannular meeting between the Venerabilii decided that they would attempt to bring the Gonrid Empire back under Ariman rule. The old usurper, Vetrianus, had died and Mausius, his successor, had also passed away. A new, more vigorous ruler, Domitian, had taken over. However, he was unable to secure the backing of Assyriae in the same manner, and the Aramans sensed a potential weakness. The campaign that started in 289 was one of the largest launched since the invasion of Vanarambaeum in 60. Auxentius would lead the main thrust into the heartland of the Gonrid Empire in Expertia, whilst Petronius would attack Vanarambaeum. The campaigns were bloody but ended up bringing both Vanarambaeum and Expertia back into the Ariman fold. However, the campaign dragged on until 294, with numerous legions eventually being drawn from other parts of the empire in order to complete the pacification. Domitian was able to escape and fled to the homeland of the Assyriae, where he eventually committed suicide. Several Ariman generals carved a name for themselves as the Venerabilii had to pay attention to other parts of their districti. Due to the size of Vanarambaeum, Auxentius felt he was forced to make it into another districtus, called Catanensis. He also appointed another pair of senior and junior emperors. This was partially to help with the administration of the expanded empire, but also to try to reward the generals who had helped conquer the island, in case they started to think about breaking the stability of the new state. The Venerabilius appointed was Aemilianus, and the Cata, Methodius. They were able to stamp out the final pockets of organized resistance to Ariman rule, although the packs of brigands that had plagued Rome since the crisis earlier in the century were as common on Vanarambaeum as everywhere else. For the first time in over 30 years, the Pax Romana had been returned to the heartlands of the empire. One of the reasons for the campaign taking longer than initially hoped for by Auxentius was that the Magister Utrius Classi, commander of the navies, Lysandrus Taggers revolted against the plans put forth by the Octarchy. Lysandrus had led the defense of the remaining southern provinces of the empire for some time and felt he deserved the position of Venerabilius, if not a leading role in the conquest of the breakaway empire. Instead, he was snubbed by Auxentius, who took the usual Ariman line of virtually ignoring the navy and had never considered Lysandras in the first place. This came to a head in 288 CE, when Lysandras revolted and took much of the naval forces, as well as many land garrisons, in the Mare Ragas with him, leaving Europa and eventually ending up in Aurelia. This is suggested to have caused the reconquest of the Gonrid Empire to have lasted several years longer than had been planned. System phrase. The next major test of the Octarchy, although now a Dicarchy, came in 296. The 15-year limit was up and the Venerabiliae had to step down and retire. Something that Auxentius had overlooked, or assumed that it would all be worked out, was what to do with Venerabiliae who had taken over from others. It was determined, by Auxentius, that they would have to retire as well and that the limits were absolute and not related to when any of the emperors ascended to the throne. It appears to run smoothly, at first. The Venerabiliae stepped down and the Cottae took over their positions, and they appointed their own Cottae in turn. It seemed that the system put in place by Auxentius had been able to overcome the weaknesses inherent in the imperial system and put the chaos of since the year of the 9 emperors behind it. It did not last. Whilst Auxentius and Faltonius seemed to be content in retirement, and Aemilianus had used the invasion of Banorambéum to amass vast wealth and estates, where he was now playing a role as a gentleman farmer, the other two were less willing to slip into retirement. Petronius and Dalmatius were not so content to relinquish power, despite having agreed to it when they became Venerabiliae. Although both men did retire to their estates in the same manner as the other three, they immediately began to correspond with their former generals, and even the Shahancha of Kusha, quickly spinning a conspiracy to take back their former authority. They struck in the early spring of 297. Roughly half of the legions garrisoning the Litus Thalaricanum and Limes Atlanticum districti came over to the two usurpers, and an invasion by the Kushans meant that loyalist forces in the area were scrambling to defend Ariman territory. The renegade forces met at the Aijos River and force marched south, attempting to make it to Rome before any resistance could be assembled against them. They hoped that once they held the capital, the rest of the empire would see sense and come over to them. The Cussian invaders were able to quickly overrun the defenders and occupied much of Limes Atlanticum. This meant that the forces under Venerabiliae Decimius and Arborius were struggling with the defense of the Ariman Empire and unable to give chase. Although the way to the old capital was relatively clear, not everything went the way of Petronius and Dalmatius. The way down the Aijos was the easiest route, but they were having to contend with scratch-blocking forces, as well as harassing cavalry attacks. By the time they had arrived at the gates of Rome in early summer, Ambrosianus had assembled enough forces from Expuriensis to bring them to battle. Burning of Rome. Burning of Rome by Zuvert Robertos. A painting of the fire spreading through Rome. In the Battle of Veii Fields, the two sides met. Although both forces contained significant numbers of cavalry, they had been committed in piecemeal skirmishes in the days leading up to the battle, so the battle itself was mainly a slog between the veteran infantry forces of both sides. Ambrosianus himself had been nervous about the coming battle, and so had delayed engaging until there was a chance that the coming sunset could cover his retreat. In the end, both sides suffered horrendous casualties and Ambrosianus was forced to break off and use the darkness to cover his retreat, almost as he had planned. The usurpers feared to stay on the battlefield, in case any pursuing forces caught up with them. They quickly marched on Rome. Rome had little to defend itself with. The garrison forces, such as they were, had been stripped by Ambrosianus in order to bolster his own forces that had been strung out by their march from the southeast. The walls and defenses of the ancient city were in a state of disrepair. At first, a body of armed citizens attempted to stop the forces of Petronius and Dalmatius from entering the city, but they were quickly ridden down by the returning heavy cavalry of the usurpers. And when the forces did enter the city, there was no triumphal moment. Ambrosianus had been quick to spread the news that the two usurpers had invited the ancient Cussian enemy to attack Ariman territory. The citizens of Rome began to riot as soon as the vanguard entered into the city limits. Venerabilius himself boasted that he had found Rome a city of brick and left it one of marble. In actuality, it always remained one of wood. As the rioting against the entry of the forces of the two usurpers into the city reached a fever pitch, a fire broke out, which swiftly turned into a conflagration that engulfed the ancient capital. It had been a dry spring and summer, and the fire burned for almost a week before it died down. The forces of the usurpers withdrew from the capital and occupied the cities of west of Rome. Much of the empire was in a state of shock as they heard the news of the capital burning down, and the rest of the autarky was gathering forces to seek revenge. They came from three very powerful Germanic peoples, the Saxons, Angles, and Jutes. The people of Kent and the inhabitants of the Isle of Wight are of Jutish origin, and also those opposite the Isle of Wight, that are part of the kingdom of Wessex, which is still today called the nation of the Jutes. From the Saxon country, that is, the district now known as Old Saxony, came the East Saxons, the South Saxons, and the West Saxons. Besides this, from the country of the Angles, that is, the land between the kingdoms of the Jutes and the Saxons, which is called Angulus, came the East Angles, the Middle Angles, the Mercians, and all of the Northumbrian people, that is those people who dwell north of the river Humber, as well as the other Anglian peoples. Angulus is said to have remained deserted from that day to this. Anglo-Saxon and British kingdoms c. 800. The four main kingdoms in Anglo-Saxon England were 1. East Anglia, 2. Mercia, 3. Northumbria, including subkingdoms Bernicia and Dara, 4. Wessex. Minor kingdoms: Essex, Kent, Sussex. Other minor kingdoms and territories: Hastings, Wix. Kingdom of the Acclingas, a precursor state to Mercia. Isle of Wight, Witwara. Lindsey, Magonseat. Meonwara, the Meon Valley area of Hampshire. Peckseat, Surrey. Tomseat, Riosenseat. Toward the finish of the 6th century, the most remarkable ruler in England was Ethelbert of Kent, whose terrain stretched out north to the river Humber. In the early long stretches of the 7th century, Kent and East Anglia were the main English realms. After the demise of Ethelbert in 616, Raedwald of East Anglia turned into the most impressive pioneer south of the Humber. Following the demise of Athelfrith of Northumbria, Raedwald gave military help to the Dairan Edwin in his battle to assume control over the two lines of Dara and Bernicia in the brought-together realm of Northumbria. Upon the demise of Raedwald, Edwin had the option to seek after an amazing arrangement to extend Northumbrian power. The becoming stronger of Edwin of Northumbria constrained the Anglo-Saxon Mercians under Penda into a coalition with the Welsh king Cadwallon ap Cadfan of Gwynedd, and together they attacked Edwin's territories and crushed and killed him at the Battle of Hatfield Chase in 633. Their prosperity was brief, as Oswald, one of the children of the late king of Northumbria, Athelfrith, crushed and killed Cadwallon at Havenfield, close to Hexham. In under 10 years, Penda again battled against Northumbria, and killed Oswald in the Battle of Maserfield in 642. His sibling Oswiu was pursued toward the northern limits of his realm. In any case, Oswiu killed Penda soon after, and Mercia spent the remainder of the 7th and all of the 8th century battling the realm of Powys. The conflict arrived at its peak during the rule of Offa of Mercia, who is associated with the development of a 150-mile-long dike which shaped the Wales/England line. It isn't evident whether this was a limit line or a guarded position. The ascendancy of the Mercians reached a conclusion in 825, when they were adequately beaten under Beornwulf at the Battle of Ellendun by Egbert of Wessex. Christianity had been brought into the British Isles during the Roman occupation. The early Christian Berber writer, Tertullian, writing in the 3rd century, said that Christianity might really be found in Britain. The Roman Emperor Constantine, 306–337, truly official resilience to Christianity with the Edict of Milan in 313. Then, at that point, in the rule of Emperor Theodosius the Great, 378–395, Christianity was made the authority religion of the Roman Empire. Escombe Church, a re-established 7th century Anglo-Saxon church. Church design and ancient rarities give a helpful wellspring of recorded data. It isn't altogether clear the number of Britons would have been Christian when the agnostic Anglo-Saxons showed up. There had been endeavors to proselytize the Irish by Pope Celestine I in 431. Nonetheless, it was St. Patrick who was credited with changing over the Irish as once huge mob. A Christian Ireland then, at that point, set about evangelizing the other British Isles, and Columba was shipped off tracked down a strict local area in Iona, off the west shoreline of Scotland. Then, at that point, Aidan was sent from Iona to set up his find in Northumbria, at Lindisfarne, somewhere in the range of 635 and 651. Subsequently Northumbria was changed over by the Celtic, Irish, Church. Bede is exceptionally unflattering with regards to the native British pastorate. In his Historia Ecclesiastica he grumbles of their unspeakable wrongdoings, and that they didn't lecture the competence to the Angles or Saxons. Pope Gregory I sent Augustine in 597 to change over the Anglo-Saxons. However, Bede says the British ministry wouldn't help Augustine in his central goal. Notwithstanding Bede's grievances, it is currently accepted that the Britons assumed a significant part in the transformation of the Anglo-Saxons. On appearance in the south-east of England in 597, Augustine was given land by King Ethelbert of Kent to fabricate a congregation, so in 597 Augustine assembled the congregation and established the see at Canterbury. Ethelbert was sanctified through water by 601, and he then, at that point, went on with his central goal to change over the English. A large portion of the north and east of England had effectively been proselytized by the Irish Church. Nonetheless, Sussex and the Isle of Wight remained for the most part agnostic until the appearance of St. Wilfrid, the banished Archbishop of York, who changed over Sussex around 681 and the Isle of Wight in 683. This era of the Anglo-Saxon monks sprung a new type of hermit, a devoted monk named Street Cuthbert, appointed Bishop of Lindisfarne, but resigned the post a few years later, preferring a more hermit way of life. 684 AD Cuthbert often made it a habit walking to outlying villages to preach the good news. Trips through the country took him away from his monastery in Ripon to some lonely spots over many days. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the intricate tapestry of Anglo-Saxon history. For those eager to delve deeper into the mysteries of this fascinating era, we invite you to explore Anglo-Saxons by John Livingston, available on Amazon, a comprehensive guide that unveils the layers of a bygone world. To further enrich your understanding, sign up at Bosses Made Men Research, a gateway to comprehensive research on Anglo-Saxon civilization. Uncover the nuances, untold stories, and scholarly insights that breathe life into the pages of history. As we conclude this brief documentary, may the echoes of the past linger in your thoughts, a reminder of the vibrant tales that shape our understanding of the Anglo-Saxon legacy. Until we embark on our next exploration of history, may your curiosity be your guiding light.